The transport ship carrying Ambassador Hyun-Ki and his team docked at Concordia Prime exactly at noon, Galactic Standard Time. The massive space station hung in the void like a metal flower, its arms reaching out toward the stars. This neutral station had been built specifically for meetings between different species. Today, it would host what everyone knew would be the most important diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Hyun-Ki stepped off the ship wearing his formal black diplomatic uniform. The golden pin on his collar showed Earth and its moon, surrounded by the stars of human space. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen 40 years of interstellar politics. Behind him walked his small team of advisors and assistants. Dong-Su, his military advisor, walked beside him. The former admiral wore his dress uniform but kept his hand near his sidearm out of habit. He had fought in 3 border wars and survived 2 assassination attempts. His weathered face showed the strain of preparing for this moment. "The others are already here," said Lina, Hyun-Ki's intelligence officer. She was young but sharp, with eyes that missed nothing. "All 3 delegations arrived yesterday. They've been meeting without us." "Of course they have," Hyun-Ki replied quietly. His voice carried no surprise or anger. He had expected this. The corridors of Concordia Prime buzzed with activity. Alien species that normally hated each other walked side by side, united in their purpose. Security guards from all 3 major powers lined the halls. They watched the human delegation pass with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. The main conference room was enormous, with a ceiling that showed the stars outside. 3 large tables formed a triangle in the center, each occupied by one of the galactic powers. The humans had been given a smaller table set apart from the others, as if they were guests rather than equals. At the first table sat the Vorthak delegation. These were tall, muscular beings with thick gray skin and 4 arms. Their leader, General Kethmore, wore armor covered in battle scars. His species had conquered half the galaxy through pure military might. They respected only strength and viewed diplomacy as weakness. The second table held the Quillen Consortium representatives. The Quillens looked almost human except for their blue-tinted skin and completely black eyes. They controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes and banks. Their leader, Trademaster Zivlak, wore robes covered in precious metals and gems. Every piece of jewelry was worth more than most planets. The third table belonged to the Nexari Collective. These beings appeared as tall, thin humanoids with pale white skin and large heads. Their leader, Logic Prime Velthara, wore simple gray robes, but her eyes glowed with cybernetic implants. The Nexari had the most advanced technology in the galaxy and believed that logic should govern all decisions. Hyun-Ki took his seat at the human table. His team arranged themselves around him. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward the humans. General Kethmore stood first. His 4 arms gestured aggressively as he spoke in his species' harsh language. The translation came. "Through everyone's communication devices. Humans have expanded too far, too fast," he declared. "Your species appeared in our galaxy less than 200 years ago, yet you claim territories that stretch across dozens of star systems. This cannot continue." The general activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Human space appeared in blue, spreading like an infection across what had once been neutral territory. "You will withdraw from these systems immediately," Kethmore continued, pointing at roughly half of human space. "These worlds will be placed under Vorthak protection. Any resistance will be met with military force. Trademaster Zivlak rose next. Unlike the general's aggressive posture, the Quillen moved with calculated grace. Every gesture was designed to show his wealth and power. The economic disruption caused by human expansion has cost our member worlds trillions of credits, Zivlak said smoothly. Your species has established trade routes without proper authorization and undercut established pricing agreements. This ends now. Another holographic display showed trade routes and economic data. Red lines indicated human trade paths that allegedly violated existing agreements. Humanity will pay a restoration fee of 500 billion credits, the trademaster announced. Additionally, all human trade will be conducted through Quillen-approved channels with appropriate taxes and fees. These measures will restore balance to the galactic economy. Finally, Logic Prime Velthara stood. The Nexari leader spoke in a emotionless tone that made her words seem like natural laws rather than demands. Human technological development proceeds without proper oversight, she stated. Your species has developed weapons, propulsion systems, and communication networks that lack appropriate safety protocols. This represents a danger to galactic stability. The third holographic display showed human technology compared to established galactic standards. According to the Nexari analysis, humans had developed several technologies that exceeded recommended power levels. All human research and development will be supervised by Nexari technical advisors, Velthara continued. Existing weapon systems will be downgraded to acceptable parameters. All new technology must receive approval before implementation. The three leaders looked at Hyun Ki expectantly. Around the room, dozens of alien diplomats, guards, and observers waited for the human response. Hyun Ki remained seated. He had listened to everything without changing expression. Now he looked at each delegation in turn, his face calm and thoughtful. I see, he said finally. So let me understand the situation clearly. He stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. General Kethmore, you want us to abandon half our colonies and submit to Vorthak military authority. Trademaster, Zivlak, you want us to pay enormous fees and conduct all trade through your networks. Logic, Prime Velthara, you want to control our research and downgrade our defenses. These are not requests, General Kethmore growled. These are requirements for peace. The alternative is war, added Trademaster Zivlak. Compliance ensures galactic stability, Logic Prime Velthara concluded. Hyun Ki nodded as if considering their words. He walked around his table, his hands clasped behind his back. The room remained silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. You know, Hyun Ki said conversationally, when humans first reach the stars, we hope to find friends among the galaxy's older civilizations. We imagined sharing knowledge, culture, and resources. We dreamed of building something greater, together. He stopped walking and faced the three delegations. Instead, we found this: three powers that view our success as a threat to their authority. Species that see our independence as a challenge to their control. Civilizations that demand submission as the price of peace. General Kethmore slammed one of his 4 fists on the table. Your species is young and arrogant. You must learn your place. Our place? Hyun Ki asked softly. And what place would that be? As your vassals? Your servants? Your slaves? Trademaster Zivlak leaned forward. These terms are generous. Refuse them, and the consequences will be severe. Logic Prime Velthara's cybernetic eyes glowed brighter. Continued resistance serves no logical purpose. Submit now, and minimize future conflict. Hyun-ki looked at his team. Dong-soo gave him a slight nod. Lee-na's fingers moved quickly over her datapad, no doubt sending final reports back to Earth. The other human advisors watched their ambassador with trust and pride. 40 years I've served as humanity's voice in galactic affairs, Hyun-ki said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast room. 40 years of negotiations, treaties, and compromises. 40 years of trying to find common ground with species that view us as nothing more than upstart primitives. He walked back to his table and picked up his formal diplomatic seal, a device that could authorize agreements on behalf of all humanity. I had hoped that this meeting would be different, that perhaps finally we could sit as equals and discuss our differences with mutual respect. The three alien leaders waited. Around the room, guards shifted nervously. Everyone could sense that something significant was about to happen. Hyun-ki placed the diplomatic seal in his jacket pocket. Instead, you offer us the choice between slavery and war. You demand that we abandon our colonies, surrender our independence, and submit to your authority. You present these ultimatums as if they were reasonable requests. His voice remained calm, but something in his tone made the aliens lean forward. Gentlemen, ladies, honored delegates, Hyun-ki said formally. After careful consideration of your proposals, I must deliver humanity's official response. The room held its breath. Hyun-ki straightened his jacket, adjusted his collar pin, showing Earth and its moon, and looked directly at each of the three delegations. We respectfully decline. Good day. He turned and walked toward the exit. His team immediately fell in behind him. Their footsteps echoed in the suddenly silent room. General Kethmore recovered first. You cannot simply leave. We are not finished. Hyun-ki paused at the doorway, but did not turn around. Yes, he said quietly. We are. The human delegation left Concordia Prime within the hour. Their transport ship departed without requesting clearance or filing a flight plan. It simply vanished into hyperspace, heading toward human territory. In the conference room, the three galactic powers stared at each other in shock. None of them had expected this response. They had prepared for anger, for desperate negotiations, even for military threats. They had not prepared for calm rejection and dignified withdrawal. It would be the last time any of them saw an official human diplomat. Captain Mi-young stood on the bridge of her exploration vessel, the Soul's Pride, staring at the message that had just arrived through the quantum communication network. She read it 3 times to make sure she understood correctly. All human. Vessels are to return to Terran space immediately, she read aloud to her crew. All diplomatic channels are closed. All trade agreements are suspended, effective immediately. Her first officer, Lieutenant Wu Jin, looked confused. Captain, we're in the middle of mapping the neutral zone. Our mission isn't scheduled to end for another 6 months. Mi-young continued reading. New orders supersede all previous missions. Return to Earth space by the fastest route possible. Avoid contact with non-human vessels. Maintain communication silence except for emergency situations. The message was signed by someone she had never heard of. Tae-min, Director of Operations. Quiet Protocol. Quiet Protocol? Asked her navigation officer, Ensign Sora. What's that? I have no idea, Mi-young admitted. She had been in space for 15 years and had never heard of any protocol with that name. But these orders come with authentication codes that I recognize. They're legitimate. Across human space, similar messages reached every ship, station, and colony. The recall was swift and complete. Military vessels abandoned their patrol routes. Trade ships canceled their delivery schedules. Research teams packed up experiments that had been running for years. Commander Jin Ho received his orders while his battleship was docked at Neutral Station 7, a trading post used by multiple species. His crew was on shore leave, mixing freely with alien traders and diplomats. "Signal all personnel," he told his communications officer. "Everyone back on board in 2 hours, no exceptions." "Sir, what about the shore leave passes? Some crew members were planning to stay another week." "Canceled. Everyone back now." Within hours, Jin Ho's ship was pulling away from the station. The alien port authorities tried to contact them, asking about departure taxes and customs clearance. Jin Ho ignored their calls completely. At the Quillen trade hub known as Commerce Central, dozens of human merchants received the same message. Captain Namsu had been negotiating a major deal to supply rare metals to Quillen manufacturers. The contract would have made him wealthy. He stood up in the middle of the negotiation and began packing his documents. "Where are you going?" asked his Quillen business partner, Trader Zekmol. "We haven't finished discussing the terms." "I'm afraid the deal is off," Namsu said politely. "I have to leave immediately." "But we've been working on this for months. My investors are expecting this shipment." Namsu sealed his briefcase and headed for the door. "I'm sorry. I really am." "When will you be back?" Zikmol called after him. Namsu paused at the doorway. Something in his expression made the alien trader step backward. "We won't be back," Namsu said quietly. Then he was gone. The pattern repeated. Across the galaxy, human civilians packed their belongings and left mixed-species stations. Human businesses closed their doors without explanation. Human ships departed from alien ports, leaving behind confused dock workers and unpaid bills. Earth, Director Taman worked from a facility that officially did not exist. The quiet protocol had been planned for years, but no one had expected to actually use it. Now, as reports flooded in from across human space, he coordinated the largest withdrawal in galactic history. "Status report," he requested from his aide. "A young woman named Haya Jin. 93% of human vessels have acknowledged recall orders," she reported. "Military fleets are establishing new defensive positions along our borders. Colonial evacuation is proceeding ahead of schedule." "What about resistance? Are any of our people refusing to comply?" "Minimal. A few private traders are asking for extensions to complete business deals. Some research teams want to finish critical experiments, but overall compliance is excellent." Taman nodded. Humans had always been good at following orders when survival was at stake, and make no mistake, this was about survival. In the Vorthak Empire, General Kethmore received reports that confused and angered him. Human colonies along the border were being abandoned, not destroyed, not evacuated under threat, simply emptied. "What do you mean, empty?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. "Exactly that, General. Our scouts report that the humans have left these worlds completely. The buildings are intact, the infrastructure is undamaged, but there are no people. They're hiding. Send ground troops to search for underground facilities." The search teams found nothing. The human colonies were genuinely empty. Worse, they had been stripped of anything valuable. Technology, resources, even personal belongings were gone. It was as if the inhabitants had simply evaporated. Similar reports reached the Quillen Consortium. Trademaster Zivlak studied shipping manifests that made no sense. "They're canceling everything," his assistant reported. Delivery contracts, supply agreements, even long-term partnerships. The humans are pulling out of every deal we have with them. What's their excuse? Are they trying to renegotiate terms? That's just it, sir. They're not offering any excuses. They're not trying to renegotiate. They're just leaving. The Quillen economic analysts ran projections and found disaster. Human trade represented 15% of the consortium's total commerce. Losing it overnight would cause massive disruption. The Nexari Collective tried to monitor human communications to understand what was happening. Logic Prime Velthara assigned her best technicians to intercept human messages. "What are they saying to each other?" she asked. "Nothing, Logic Prime," her chief analyst reported. "Human communications have been reduced by 97%. The few messages we can intercept are routine operational data. No discussions of strategy, no expressions of anger or fear, no political debates. That's impossible. A species doesn't coordinate this kind of withdrawal without extensive communication. Nevertheless, the data is clear. The humans have gone almost completely silent." This silence was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the human withdrawal. When the Vorthak had conquered territory, they had broadcast demands and threats. When the Quillens had imposed trade restrictions, they had published detailed explanations. When the Nexari had taken control of neutral zones, they had issued logical justifications. But the humans said nothing. No angry speeches, no diplomatic protests, no military threats. They simply left. Captain Dong Su, now promoted to admiral, oversaw the establishment of new defensive positions along humanity's borders. His fleets took positions that no alien vessel could penetrate, but they made no aggressive moves toward alien territory. "Orders, sir?" asked his fleet commander. "Hold position. Maintain defensive readiness. Do not initiate contact with alien vessels." "What if they try to communicate with us?" "You don't hear them." The new doctrine was simple but effective. Human forces would defend their territory, but would not engage with aliens under any circumstances. It was as if the rest of the galaxy had simply stopped existing. Colonial Administrator Yunji supervised the evacuation of human settlements in disputed territories. These operations were conducted with military precision. Entire cities were dismantled and transported to human space within weeks. "Are we destroying anything that can't be moved?" asked her deputy. "No, we take everything useful and leave the rest intact. No sabotage, no scorched earth tactics. We're not trying to hurt them, we're just leaving." The alien powers expected retaliation. They prepared for human attacks on their supply lines, sabotage of their facilities, or at least angry demands for negotiations. Instead, they got silence. This silence was more unsettling than any threat would have been. Threats could be answered with force. Demands could be negotiated. But silence left them guessing and worrying. What were the humans planning? Were they building up for a massive attack? Were they developing new weapons? Were they forming alliances with other species? The lack of information drove the aliens to distraction. Intelligence services across the galaxy worked overtime trying to understand human intentions. Spy networks that had taken decades to build suddenly found their human contacts unreachable. Informants stopped reporting. Communication channels went dead. Young Officer Kyung-ho served aboard one of the last human ships to leave alien space. His vessel had been conducting scientific research in the neutral zone, working alongside alien scientists from all three major powers. "Sir," he reported to his captain, "the alien research teams are requesting an explanation for our departure. They say the joint project is too important to abandon." Tell them nothing, the captain replied. Pack up our equipment and prepare for departure. But, sir, some of these alien scientists have become friends. They've worked with us for years. Don't we owe them some kind of explanation? The captain looked sad, but determined. We owe them nothing. And more importantly, we have nothing to say to them. As the last human ships crossed the border into Terran space, an invisible barrier seemed to fall across the galaxy. On one side were the aliens, confused and increasingly worried. On the other side was humanity, silent and unreachable. The great silence had begun, and in that silence, fears began to grow that would eventually consume the galaxy. Captain Young-Ho had been running the Deep Space Monitoring Station at Border Post 7 for 12 years. His job was simple: watch the sensors and report anything unusual crossing between human space and the neutral zones. It had always been boring work until the Great Silence began. Now, 1 year after the human withdrawal, his job had become the most terrifying assignment in the galaxy. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported his sensor operator, Lieutenant Minji. Single, vessel, human design, moving at standard cruise speed. Young-Ho studied the display. The signature was definitely human, a mid-sized transport ship probably carrying supplies or personnel. But according to official records, no human ships were supposed to be operating outside Terran space. Signal the Vorthak patrol in that sector, he ordered. Let them know we have a contact. 20 minutes later, the Vorthak response came back. Sector search complete. No vessels detected. Repeat, no vessels in designated area. Young-Ho stared at his instruments. The human ship was still there on his sensors, moving steadily through space. But somehow, the Vorthak couldn't see it. Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array, he told Minji. Already did, sir. Sensors are functioning perfectly. The ship is definitely there. Then why can't the Vorthak find it? Minji had no answer. Neither did Young-Ho. This scene repeated itself across the border regions. Human ships appeared on long-range sensors but vanished whenever anyone tried to investigate. The aliens began to suspect that humans had developed some kind of advanced stealth technology, but even that explanation didn't make sense. Stealth. Systems usually left some trace, some distortion that trained operators could detect. These human ships simply weren't there when anyone looked for them. Dr. Yunji stood in what had once been the human research facility on Kepler Station. The abandoned laboratory was spotless, as if the human scientists had spent days cleaning before they left. Every piece of equipment was gone, every data file deleted, every personal item removed. But that wasn't the strangest part. Look at this, she told her assistant, pointing to a wall panel. The humans didn't just remove their equipment. They removed every trace that their equipment had ever existed. The wall showed no bolt holes, no scuff marks, no worn spots where heavy machinery had been installed. It was as if the human research lab had never existed at all. Her assistant, a young Nexari named Kolvan, ran his scanner over the wall. Impossible. This level of restoration would require molecular-level reconstruction. The humans would need technology far beyond anything we've seen from them. Yunji moved to another section of the lab. It's the same everywhere. They didn't just clean up. They erased themselves from this place completely. Similar reports came from abandoned human settlements across the neutral territories. Buildings that had housed human families for decades showed no signs of ever being occupied. Farmland that humans had cultivated for years appeared untouched. Even the soil analysis showed no trace of human agricultural techniques. It was as if humanity had learned to edit reality itself. Admiral Gorthek of the Vorthak Imperial Fleet paced angrily across his command deck. His forces had moved quickly to occupy the territories that humans had abandoned, expecting to find valuable resources and strategic positions. Instead, they found empty worlds that seemed to mock their presence. "Status report," he demanded from his intelligence officer. 73 former human worlds are now under our control, Major Techmore reported. All appear to be completely abandoned. No resistance encountered. Appear to be abandoned? Sir, we've conducted extensive scans. No life signs, no active technology, no hidden facilities. But what? Techmore looked uncomfortable. The troops report feeling watched. Security cameras pick up movement in empty buildings. Sensors detect sounds that shouldn't exist on dead worlds. Gorthek slammed his fist on the command console. "Are you telling me that my warriors are afraid of ghosts?" "No, sir. But something is wrong with these places. The humans left them too clean, too empty. It's not natural." The admiral had to admit that his officer was right. In his long military career, Gorthek had conquered dozens of worlds. Usually, the defeated population left behind evidence of their presence: broken equipment, hidden supplies, angry graffiti, something. But the humans had left nothing except an eerie sense that they were still somehow present. Meanwhile, in a facility that existed in the spaces between normal dimensions, a man named Haiwan coordinated what the human leadership called the Ghost Protocol. He was no longer entirely human himself, having undergone modifications that allowed him to exist partially outside normal space-time. "Report from Sector 12, his assistant Young-min announced. Young-min had been modified even more extensively, appearing as a translucent figure that flickered in and out of visibility. "The Quillen trade convoy passed through the system without detecting our monitoring station," she continued. "We have complete records of their cargo manifests, communication logs, and destination plans." Haiwan nodded. The humans weren't hiding from the aliens. They were operating on a level the aliens couldn't perceive. It was like watching ants while being invisible to them. "Any signs that they suspect our presence?" "None. To them, we simply don't exist." This was the most disturbing aspect of humanity's new capabilities. They hadn't developed better stealth technology or more powerful weapons. They had somehow stepped sideways from reality, becoming observers rather than participants in the galactic community. Dr. In-Su worked in a laboratory that technically didn't exist in normal space. Around him, the greatest minds of humanity labored on projects that would have been considered impossible just 2 years ago. The Great Silence had freed them from the need to explain their research to aliens who wouldn't understand it anyway. "Progress report on Project Dimensional Fold," he requested from his team leader, Dr. Su-jin. "We've successfully isolated 17 research facilities from normal space-time," she reported. "Each one exists in a pocket dimension accessible only through quantum tunneling techniques." "And the larger project?" Su-jin smiled, though her expression was slightly unsettling. Like many of the research team, her modifications were becoming visible. Her eyes now glowed with an inner light that hadn't been there when she was fully human. "We're ahead of schedule. At current progress rates, we'll be ready for Phase 2 within 6 months." In-Su nodded. Phase 2 would change everything, but the aliens would never see it coming. How could they prepare for something they couldn't even imagine? The Nexari Collective tried desperately to understand what the humans were doing. Logic Prime Velthara assigned her best analysts to study the fragments of human communication they could still intercept. Analysis complete, reported her chief technician, Unit Zekska. Human communications now use quantum encryption methods that should be theoretically impossible with their technology level. Explain. The encryption requires computational power equivalent to a stellar mass processor. No known civilization possesses such resources. Velthara's cybernetic implants flickered as she processed this information. Are you suggesting the humans have developed computational technology beyond our understanding? That is the only logical conclusion. However, it contradicts all our previous assessments of human technological capabilities. The Logic Prime felt something she had never experienced before: doubt. The Nexari prided themselves on their ability to analyze and understand any technology. If the humans had surpassed them so dramatically, what else were they capable of? Back on the monitoring station, Captain Young-Ho received a communication that made his blood freeze. The message came through official human channels, but the sender was listed as Observer Class 7. Monitor Young-Ho. The message read, "Your service is noted and appreciated. Continue current assignment. Do not attempt to locate or contact observer units. Your safety depends on maintaining ignorance of our operations." Young-Ho stared at the message. Observer Class 7? He had never heard of any such classification in the human military or government. But the authentication codes were valid, and the message had come through channels that were supposed to be completely secure. Who were the observers, and how many of them were out there, moving invisibly through alien space? The answer came sooner than he expected. 3 days later, a Quillen trade ship exploded without warning while traveling through what should have been completely safe space. There were no enemy vessels in the area, no weapon signatures, no distress calls. The ship simply ceased to exist. The Quillen authorities investigated frantically, but found no evidence of an attack. It was as if the ship had been erased from reality by an invisible hand. Similar incidents began occurring throughout alien space. Ships disappeared, facilities malfunctioned, important data files were corrupted. The aliens could never find any evidence of sabotage or attack, but the timing was too convenient to be coincidental. The humans weren't just watching anymore. They were acting. And they were completely invisible while doing it. Fear began to spread through the galaxy like a virus. The three great powers had expected human retaliation after the failed negotiations. They had prepared for war, for terrorism, for desperate diplomatic appeals. They had not prepared for their enemies to become ghosts. The Quillen Banking Consortium's main computer system crashed at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Within hours, similar crashes hit financial networks across 17 star systems. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries suddenly became chaotic as automated systems failed and transaction records disappeared. Trademaster Zivlak stared at the reports flooding his desk. Each one described a different financial disaster, but they all had one thing in common. The failures were surgical, precise, and left no evidence of outside interference. "How much have we lost?" he asked his chief financial officer, a nervous Quillen named Mordek. "It's hard to calculate, sir. The failures seem random, but when we analyze the pattern—" Mordek paused, his black eyes widening with fear. "What? Pattern? Every system that failed was connected to former human trade agreements. Ships that used to carry human cargo, stations that processed human goods, banks that handled human currency exchanges. It's as if something is systematically destroying every connection we had to humanity." Zivlak felt a chill run through his blue-tinted skin. That's impossible. The humans have been gone for 2 years. They have no access to our systems. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Somehow, somewhere, humans were still watching, still acting, still punishing those who had rejected them. The economic damage spread like a plague across the galaxy. Supply chains that had been stable for decades began collapsing as key links failed. Automated systems developed mysterious glitches that caused massive shipping delays. Financial records became corrupted, making it impossible to complete transactions. Ki Young had once been Earth's Minister of Trade, responsible for negotiating the complex agreements that kept goods flowing between human space and the rest of the galaxy. Now he existed in a form that was only partially physical, coordinating humanity's invisible economic warfare from a facility that existed between dimensions. He studied the reports with satisfaction. Every trade agreement he had negotiated during 40 years of service contained hidden dependencies, subtle requirements that other species had never bothered to understand. Now, without human participation, those dependencies were causing cascade failures throughout the galactic economy. Status report on Project Economic Collapse, he requested from his assistant, Hyojin. Quillen trade revenues are down 37%, she reported. Her form flickered like a hologram as she moved between dimensional states. Vorthak military supply lines are experiencing critical shortages. Nexari research projects are being delayed due to resource allocation failures. And they still don't. Understand what's causing it? No. They're blaming each other, market forces, even random chance. None of them have figured out that their economies were dependent on human involvement. Ki Young nodded. It had taken decades to build those dependencies, weaving human involvement so deeply into galactic commerce that removing it would cause system-wide collapse. The aliens had been so eager to get rid of human competition that they had never asked how their own systems would function without human participation. Now they were learning the answer the hard way. On the Vorthak homeworld, General Kethmore faced a crisis that threatened his empire's military dominance. His weapons were failing at an alarming rate, not through enemy action, but through simple mechanical breakdown. "Report!" he barked at his chief engineer, Major Vokhtar. "Sir, we've lost 17 battleships to critical system failures in the past month. Weapon systems, shield generators, propulsion units, they're all breaking down simultaneously." "What's causing it?" Vokhtar looked uncomfortable. "We're not sure, sir. The failures appear to be related to maintenance protocols that we adopted from human technical advisors." Kethmore's forearms tensed with rage. "Human advisors? We threw the humans out of our space 2 years ago." "Yes, sir. But before they left, they helped us upgrade many of our systems. They provided new maintenance schedules, improved repair procedures, enhanced performance protocols. Our technicians implemented their recommendations across the entire fleet." The general began to understand the scope of the disaster. "Are you telling me that our military depends on human technical knowledge?" "Not depends, sir. Depended. The humans built subtle requirements into their upgrades. Without their continued technical support, the enhanced systems are reverting to baseline performance, which means our weapons are becoming obsolete," Kethmore finished grimly. The Vorthak had conquered half the galaxy through superior military technology. If their weapons were failing, their empire would crumble within years, and there was no one left to ask for help. The humans had vanished completely. Similar problems plagued all 3 galactic powers. Research projects ground to a halt when critical components could no longer be manufactured. Transportation networks broke down as navigation systems developed mysterious errors. Even basic communication between star systems became unreliable. Doctor. Sang-Ho walked through the corridors of Nexari Central Command, invisible to the aliens around him. His mission was simple: observe and report. But after 2 years of watching the Nexari struggle with problems they couldn't solve, he felt something that might have been pity, if he had still been capable of pity. The modifications that allowed him to move unseen through alien space had changed more than just his physical form. His thought processes had evolved beyond normal human parameters. He could see patterns and connections that his original mind never could have comprehended. Logic. Prime Velthera stood before a massive display showing the collective's research status. Red indicators marked failed projects, yellow showed delayed initiatives, and green represented successful programs. The display was almost entirely red and yellow. "Explain this failure," she commanded her research director, Unit Colvan. Logic Prime. Our research programs were more dependent on human collaboration than we realized. Many of our advances over the past 50 years built upon human theoretical work. Without access to human researchers, we cannot progress beyond our current limitations. The humans were primitive. How could advanced Nexari science depend on their contributions? Colvan's cybernetic implants flickered as he processed the question. Analysis suggests that human thought patterns complement Nexari logic in ways we did not anticipate. Their intuitive leaps often provided solutions to problems that pure logic could not solve. Velthara felt her certainty crumbling. The Nexari had always believed that logic was superior to intuition, that their methodical approach was the pinnacle of scientific advancement. But the evidence suggested that they had been wrong. From his invisible position, Sang-Ho recorded everything. The aliens' growing desperation would be valuable intelligence for humanity's next phase of operations. The psychological warfare was perhaps the most effective aspect of humanity's campaign. A being who called himself Yu Jin began broadcasting what became known as the Silence Lectures. The transmissions appeared on communication networks throughout alien space, bypassing all security measures. Yu Jin's voice was calm, almost hypnotic. He spoke about philosophy, mathematics, and the nature of civilizational development. His lectures contained no threats, no demands, no military intelligence. They were simply academic discussions presented by someone who clearly understood concepts far beyond normal comprehension. "Today we will discuss the mathematics of societal collapse," Eugene announced in one broadcast. "When a complex system removes a critical component, the resulting cascade failures follow predictable patterns." The lectures terrified alien listeners because they demonstrated knowledge that should have been impossible. Eugene discussed the internal workings of alien governments, the hidden flaws in their economic systems, the psychological weaknesses of their leaders. He spoke as if he had access to information that was supposed to be completely secret. More disturbing was his tone. He didn't sound angry or threatening. He sounded like a professor explaining natural phenomena to students, as if the collapse of galactic civilization was simply an interesting academic exercise. "The fascinating aspect of your current situation," he continued in another lecture, "is how your species' psychological makeup prevents you from recognizing the true nature of your predicament. You continue to seek solutions within the framework that created your problems, unable to comprehend that the framework itself has become obsolete." Alien intelligence services worked frantically to trace the broadcasts. They found transmission Sources on dozens of worlds in multiple star systems, often broadcasting simultaneously. The coordination required was impossible with known technology. Worse, some of the transmission sources were located on worlds where no human had ever been seen. Fear spread through the alien populations like a disease. Citizens who had once felt secure in their species' dominance began to question everything. If humans could infiltrate their most secure facilities undetected, what else were they capable of? The three galactic powers tried to maintain public confidence, but privately their leaders were terrified. They had expected to defeat humanity through superior numbers and technology. Instead, they found themselves fighting shadows that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. General Kethmore called an emergency meeting with his intelligence chiefs. "What do we know about current human capabilities?" "Nothing reliable, sir," admitted his intelligence director. "Our agents in human space have gone silent. Our monitoring stations detect no unusual activity. It's as if humanity has simply vanished from our ability to observe them." "But they're still acting against us?" "Yes, sir. The evidence suggests coordinated operations across multiple sectors, but we cannot determine how they're doing it or where the operations are being coordinated from." Kethmore slammed his fist on the table. "An enemy you cannot see, cannot track, and cannot fight. This is not war. This is nightmare." He was more right than he knew. Humanity had indeed become something like a nightmare, haunting the galaxy, from the spaces between reality. And the worst part was that the aliens were beginning to suspect this was only the beginning of their troubles. Captain Junseo no longer needed a physical ship to travel through space. His consciousness moved through dimensions that had no names in any known language, observing the galaxy from angles that normal minds could not comprehend. The vessel, called Invisible Dawn, existed only when he wanted it to, materializing from quantum foam when he needed to interact with physical reality. Today, he was investigating reports from the border regions where strange phenomena had been troubling alien patrols for months. What he found exceeded even his enhanced expectations. 3 years after the Great Silence began, humanity was no longer the species that had walked away from the negotiation table. They had become something else entirely. Junseo materialized his ship near a Vorthak patrol fleet. The alien vessels moved in standard formation, their sensors sweeping space for threats they could not see. He watched them through perception modes that had no equivalent in normal reality. "Subjects display elevated stress indicators," he noted. To himself, his thoughts automatically recorded by systems that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. "Fear responses consistent with prey animals sensing unseen predators." The Vorthak crews were terrified, though they tried to hide it from each other. Their instruments detected gravitational anomalies that made no sense. Space itself seemed to bend around certain regions, creating navigation hazards that appeared and disappeared without warning. What the aliens didn't know was that humanity had learned to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality. The gravitational distortions were side effects of human experiments that treated the galaxy as a laboratory. Junseo shifted his attention to a nearby star system where Dr. Chang Wook was conducting research that would have been impossible for baseline humans to even imagine. Chang Wook existed primarily as a pattern of organized energy, his consciousness distributed across multiple dimensional layers. "Progress report on stellar manipulation project," Junseo requested through quantum entanglement communication. "Excellent results," Chang Wook responded, his thoughts arriving as structured information rather than words. "We have successfully altered the fusion processes in 17 stars. The changes are subtle enough to avoid detection, but they will produce measurable effects within the next 5 years. Effects? Increased solar wind activity, minor fluctuations in stellar output, occasional gravitational pulse events. Nothing that will harm inhabited planets, but enough to cause navigation difficulties and communication disruptions throughout this sector. Junseo processed this information with satisfaction. Humanity was becoming the galaxy's weather system, creating storms and disturbances that seemed natural but followed patterns known only to them. On the hidden world of New Earth, Director Seung-min oversaw the transformation project that was turning humanity into something beyond biological limitations. The facility existed in a pocket dimension accessible only through quantum tunneling, invisible to any scanning technology the aliens possessed. The beings that had once been human moved through the research complex like living thoughts made manifest. Some had retained physical forms enhanced by technology beyond alien comprehension. Others existed as pure consciousness, interacting with reality through will alone. Status report on Phase 3 implementations, Seung-min requested from his assistant, Dr. So-jin. So-jin had been one of the first volunteers for consciousness uploading. Her current form appeared as a shifting pattern of light that hurt to look at directly. 93% of our population has undergone basic enhancement procedures, she reported. 67% have achieved dimensional transcendence. 41% have moved beyond the need for physical form entirely. Timeline for full species evolution? At current progression rates, baseline humanity will be extinct within 2 years. What replaces us will be something new. The word extinct would have terrified normal humans, but Seung-min felt only anticipation. Humanity wasn't dying. It was being reborn as something capable of existing on levels that made the three-dimensional universe seem like a shadow on a wall. In the Quillen Consortium's territory, a being who had once been named Minji completed a mission that demonstrated just how thoroughly humans had infiltrated alien society. For 15 years, she had lived among the Quillens as a successful trader, building relationships and learning their secrets. Now she stood in the private office of Trade Master Zivlak himself, her human appearance finally dropping away to reveal something that existed partially outside normal space-time. "You," Zivlak whispered, his black eyes wide with terror. "You've been among us all this time. I've been among you for longer than you know," Minji replied, her voice carrying harmonics that made reality shiver around her. "We all have." She gestured, and the air around her filled with images, hundreds of Quillens that Zivlak had known and trusted for years. Business partners, government officials, even family friends. All of them flickered and showed their true forms underneath. They were all human. "Impossible," Zivlak breathed. "Our security, our genetic scanners, our background checks were designed by us," Minji finished. "Did you really think we would withdraw from the galaxy without leaving watchers behind? We've been studying you, learning from you, preparing for this moment since before your species achieved spaceflight." The revelation shattered Zivlak's understanding of reality. If humans had been embedded in Quillen society for decades, what other impossible things were true? Minji smiled, an expression that contained too many dimensions to be properly seen. "You wanted us gone, but you never asked what we would become while we were away." She vanished, not by moving to another location, but by ceasing to exist in the dimensions where Zivlak could perceive her. The trade master was left alone with the terrible knowledge that everything he had believed about his species' security was a lie. Similar revelations occurred throughout alien space. Humans who had been trusted advisors, researchers, and even friends revealed themselves as something far beyond what they had appeared to be. The psychological impact was devastating. The Nexari Collective suffered perhaps the worst shock when Jae-hyun, who had served as a research assistant for 12 years, left behind documentation that proved humans had been guiding Nexari scientific development from within their own institutions. Logic Prime Velthara studied the files with growing horror. Every major breakthrough the Nexari had achieved in the past decade showed subtle signs of human influence. Theoretical frameworks that seemed purely logical actually contained intuitive leaps that only human minds could have provided. We have been unwitting test subjects, she realized, her cybernetic implants flickering with the strain of processing this information. They have been using us to advance their own research while making us believe we were making independent discoveries. The documentation showed the true scope of human infiltration. They had been present in alien society not for years, but for generations. Some had been so deeply embedded that they had raised alien families, contributed to alien culture, and died natural deaths while maintaining their cover. It meant that humans had been planning this withdrawal for far longer than anyone had imagined. The failed negotiations hadn't been the cause of human isolation. They had been an excuse for a plan that was already in motion. Dr. Boram, who existed now as a pattern of organized thought distributed across multiple quantum states, published what would be humanity's final communication to the galaxy. The message appeared simultaneously on every communication network, in every database, carved into the surfaces of asteroids and burned into the upper atmospheres of gas giants. It was titled, "On the Necessity of Solitude," and it explained everything. There comes a time in the development of any truly advanced species, the message began, when they must choose between remaining part of the galactic community or transcending the limitations that community imposes. The text described humanity's journey from hopeful newcomers to rejected outcasts to something beyond the need for acceptance or approval. It explained how isolation had forced them to develop capabilities that would have been impossible while constrained by alien expectations. "You feared our expansion across your territories," the message continued. "But territory is a three-dimensional concept, and we have moved beyond the need for three-dimensional existence. You worried about our technological development, not understanding that we were already developing technologies you could not perceive." The final section was the most disturbing. "We tried to be your equals. When you rejected us, we became your superiors. Now we are becoming your successors. This is not revenge. It is evolution. You wanted us to leave your galaxy. We are complying, but not in the way you expected. We are leaving your reality entirely." The message ended with coordinates. Not to locations in space, but to dimensional frequencies where humanity could be found by any species capable of transcending physical existence. None of the alien species could reach those frequencies. They were trapped in normal space-time while humanity moved beyond their ability to follow or even comprehend. The galaxy had gotten what it asked for. Humanity was gone. But in their place was something far more terrifying. The knowledge that they had evolved beyond the need to care about anything the aliens did. The Watchers in the dark were no longer watching. They had found something more interesting to observe in dimensions that had no names and no limits. What they left behind was a galaxy slowly collapsing under the weight of its own limitations, while somewhere beyond perception, their successors explored possibilities that made physical reality seem like a children's game. The Grand Council chamber on Concordia Prime had never seen a gathering like this. Representatives from all three galactic powers sat together, no longer as rivals but as desperate allies facing an enemy they could not understand or fight. 5 years had passed since the human withdrawal, and the galaxy was dying. General Kethmore of the Vorthak Empire looked older than his years. His 4 arms trembled slightly as he accessed the holographic display showing his military status. Red. Indicators covered the map like a plague. 70% of our fleet is non-operational, he reported to the assembled delegates. Critical system failures continue to cascade throughout our remaining vessels. Our weapons technology has regressed to levels not seen in 2 centuries. Trademaster. Zivlak of the Quillen Consortium appeared even worse. His once magnificent robes hung loose on his frame, and his blue-tinted skin had taken on a sickly pallor. Economic collapse is accelerating, he said in a voice barely above a whisper. 17 major trade routes have become completely unusable due to navigation anomalies. Our currency has lost 80% of its value. Entire star systems are reverting to barter economies. Logic. Prime Velthara of the Nexari Collective spoke last. Her cybernetic implants flickered erratically, showing the strain of processing information that defied logical analysis. Scientific progress has ceased. Entirely, she reported. Our research facilities cannot function without the theoretical frameworks that human infiltrators provided. We estimate that our technological development has been set back by at least 3 centuries. The chamber fell silent. Outside the windows, space looked empty and cold. Ships still moved between the stars, but fewer each day. The invisible web of connections that held galactic civilization together was unraveling strand by strand. We must contact them, General Kethmore said finally. We must find a way to bring the humans back. How? Asked Zivlak. We don't even know where they are. Our best scouts cannot locate a single human settlement. It's as if they've simply vanished from the universe. The truth was more disturbing than any of them realized. In a realm that existed between the spaces of normal reality, a being who had once been called Hyojin monitored their desperate communications. The messages from the alien leaders arrived constantly now. Pleas for negotiation, offers of tribute, even promises of complete submission. Hyojin existed primarily as a pattern of organized consciousness. Her awareness spread across multiple, dimensional layers. The alien messages were automatically sorted and filed by systems that operated on principles the senders could not comprehend. She never read them. Status report on alien communication attempts, requested Director Quan Ho, who had evolved beyond the need for a fixed physical form. 17,436 messages received in the past standard day, Hyojin responded through quantum entanglement communication. Emotional content analysis shows increasing desperation. Multiple offers of unconditional surrender. Response protocol? Continue standard procedure. No acknowledgement, no response, no indication that the messages are being received. Quan Ho processed this information with the detached interest of a god observing the death struggles of insects. The species that had once been humanity no longer cared about the aliens' offers or threats. They had transcended the need for such concerns. On the hidden world that had once been called New Earth, the final transformation was nearing completion. Dr. Sunmi stood in what had once been a research laboratory, but was now something that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Around her, the last baseline humans prepared for the ultimate evolution. "Are you ready?" she asked the volunteers. though the question was transmitted through methods that bypassed normal speech entirely. The volunteers nodded. They had been the holdouts, the ones who wanted to remain connected to physical reality for as long as possible. But now, with the project nearing completion, they too were ready to join their species in transcendence. One by one, they stepped into conversion, chambers that dissolved the boundary between matter and consciousness. Their bodies became patterns of organized energy. Their minds expanded to encompass multiple layers of reality simultaneously. Sunmi watched the process with satisfaction. Soon there would be no more baseline humans anywhere in the universe. What had once been humanity would exist only as something incomprehensibly advanced, free from the limitations of physical form. The aliens continued their desperate attempts to make contact. They sent automated probes into human space, but the probes found only empty worlds with no signs of recent habitation. They broadcast messages on every known frequency, but received only silence in return. Most disturbing of all were the expeditions sent to investigate former human colonies. The scout ships returned with reports that made no sense to their commanders. Captain Vakatar of the Vorthak scout ship Conquest submitted a report that his superiors initially rejected as impossible. Investigated former human colony world designated Target 7. Planet appears to be inhabited by beings of unknown origin. Subjects are approximately humanoid in shape, but seem to exist partially outside normal space-time. When approached, subjects demonstrate ability to manipulate local gravity, alter the passage of time, and communicate through methods that bypass known physics. When questioned about human population, subjects indicated that humans went away to become something better. Subjects showed no hostility, but demonstrated capabilities that render military action inadvisable. Recommend immediate withdrawal from this system. Similar reports came from every expedition sent to investigate human space. The beings found there were clearly connected to humanity somehow, but they had become something that the aliens could barely perceive, much less understand or fight. The psychological impact on alien populations was devastating. Citizens who had once felt secure in their species' dominance now lived in constant fear of invisible watchers. Every system failure, every unexplained phenomenon, every shadow that moved wrong was blamed on absent humans. Paranoia spread like a disease. Aliens turned on each other, convinced that their neighbors might be human infiltrators in disguise. Governments collapsed as leaders lost the trust of their people. Military forces deserted rather than patrol sectors where strange phenomena had been reported. In the depths of space, Junho existed as the last bridge between what humanity had been and what it was becoming. He alone among the transcended retained enough connection to physical reality to observe the aliens' final desperate attempts at communication. He had been chosen for this role specifically, to serve as humanity's last gift to the galaxy that had rejected them. Today, he would deliver that gift. Junho materialized in physical form for the first time in 2 years, appearing simultaneously in the council chambers of all 3 galactic powers. His presence bypassed every security system, every scanner, every defense the aliens had built. He looked human, but wrong in subtle ways that hurt to perceive directly. His eyes held depths that seemed to extend beyond the boundaries of normal space. His voice carried harmonics that made reality itself vibrate in response. "You have been attempting to contact us," he said, his words reaching every alien leader simultaneously, despite speaking from multiple locations at once. The reaction was immediate and intense. Guards raised weapons that refused to function. Alarms sounded that had no source. Emergency protocols activated systems that had been designed by human infiltrators decades earlier. General Kethmore was the first to recover his voice. We wish to negotiate. The previous terms are no longer acceptable. We're prepared to offer you anything you want. Junho smiled, an expression that contained too many dimensions to be properly seen. We tried to be your equals, he said calmly. You rejected us. You demanded that we submit to your authority, abandon our colonies, surrender our independence. Trademaster Zivlak fell to his knees. We were wrong. Please, we understand that now. Name your price. Complete autonomy, technological sharing, even tribute. Whatever you want. What we wanted, Junho continued, was to be part of something greater, to share the galaxy as friends and allies, to build a civilization that included all of us. Logic Prime Velthara's cybernetic implants sparked with desperate hope. Yes, that's what we want too. We can start over. We can build the partnership you originally proposed. Junho's smile never changed, but something in his expression made the alien step backward. You misunderstand, he said gently. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to explain. He gestured, and the air around him filled with images. The transformation of humanity, their evolution beyond physical limitations, their expansion into dimensions that had no names. The species you knew as humanity no longer exists, he continued. We have become something that has no need for your approval or your territory or your trade agreements. Then why are you here? Whispered General Kethmore. To tell you goodbye, Junho replied, and to deliver a message. He paused, his multidimensional gaze taking in each of the alien leaders. You wanted us gone. Congratulations. You succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. The images around him shifted, showing the collapsing galactic economy, the failing military systems, the spreading paranoia and fear. This is what you chose, he said. A galaxy without us. A civilization built on the assumption that you could reject progress and remain static forever. We can change, Zivlak pleaded. We can adapt. We can learn. Junho shook his head sadly. It's too late for that. You had your chance to grow beyond your limitations. Instead, you chose to limit others. He began to fade, becoming translucent as he prepared to return to the dimensions where his people now dwelled. Wait, Logic Prime Velthara called out. Where are you going? When will you return? Junho's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying the finality of a closing door. We're not going anywhere. We're becoming everything. And we won't return because there's nothing here worth returning to. He vanished, leaving behind only the echo of his words and the terrible knowledge that humanity had judged the galaxy and found it wanting. The silence that followed was absolute. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of abandonment. The galaxy continued its slow collapse, watched by beings who had once been human, but were now something immeasurably greater. They had moved beyond the need for revenge, beyond the desire for conquest, beyond even the memory of pain. What remained was indifference, the most devastating weapon of all. The galaxy had gotten exactly what it had demanded, and in getting it, they had learned the most terrifying truth in the universe. Sometimes when you reject someone's friendship, you discover that you needed them far more than they ever needed you. The silence continued. It would last forever.